They called him the perfect husband. But the night he won his biggest award, he left the stage and rushed to a hotel. Not to celebrate with me but to be with her. I didn't cry. I just disappeared. No goodbye. No explanation. And while he begged for closure, I built a new life in silence. Because some exits don't need applause. Just a locked door. The chandelier above the ballroom of the Lucent Hotel shimmered with cool, opulent light, casting crystalline reflections across white tablecloths and glinting wine glasses. Waiters floated like ghosts between guests, offering trays of canapés and whispering vintages. It was the kind of night that demanded cameras and careful smiles, and Elena Hart knew how to wear both. She stood near the floral arch, one hand resting lightly on a champagne flute, the other casually smoothing down the side of her emerald silk gown. It was a quiet kind of elegance, clean lines, minimal jewelry, not a thread out of place. Her face, glowing under the chandelier's spell, was poised, unreadable. But her chest felt hollow. Across the ballroom, Nathan Cross stood on the raised stage, shaking hands with a council member as flashes from photographers lit up the space around him. A massive screen behind him read, Metropolitan Skyline Award, Nathan Cross, Visionary in Urban Restoration. He looked beautiful tonight. Black tuxedo, steel cufflinks, his boyish charm curled in a half smile. He waved briefly at the crowd and raised his hand in a gracious bow. The applause was thunderous. Elena didn't clap. She took another sip of champagne and swallowed it down like acid. The announcement echoed from the speakers again. This year's Metropolitan Skyline Award goes to the youngest architect to ever win in the history of the foundation, Nathan Cross. She had designed the original layout of the very building he was being awarded for. But her name was nowhere in the announcement. No co-credit. No mention. A woman nearby whispered, "Isn't that his wife? Elena Hart." The other replied, "God, she's stunning. Lucky woman." Elena turned slightly, pretending not to hear. Lucky. What a ridiculous word. Nathan made a show of checking his watch as the councilman moved to the mic. "I'd love to stay and celebrate, but unfortunately," Nathan said with a charming wince, "I have somewhere far more important to be." The crowd laughed, light, indulgent. Elena's throat tightened. She had assumed he would sit beside her at the table tonight. That he would at least acknowledge her in the thank you speech, even just as, "my wife," in passing. But as he stepped down from the stage, his eyes deliberately skipped past hers. As if she were part of the wallpaper. Her phone vibrated in her clutch. It was a notification from Cassidy Monroe's live stream. "He ditched the world for me," face blowing his ring kiss mark. The thumbnail showed a rose-filled hotel suite bathed in gold light, with Cassidy in a crimson satin robe, camera tilted toward a bottle of Dom Perignon and an open jewelry box. Elena didn't click it. She didn't need to. The air conditioning in the room suddenly felt like ice against her collarbone. She exhaled once, just once, quietly and moved toward the exit. Outside, the hotel's grand fountain danced in the moonlight. Elena sat on a bench, wrapping her arms tightly around herself, even though it wasn't cold. The hum of conversation from the banquet was distant now. It was like listening to music through a wall. Soft, filtered, unreal. A server walked past, did a double take and politely asked if she was okay. She smiled at him. "I'm just taking a breath." Because what else could she say? That the man everyone just called the perfect husband was currently in a hotel suite with a woman who had once called her a furniture showroom mannequin? That she knew this because Cassidy had live-streamed it? That Nathan had told her he had a late-night interview with the board? She hadn't cried yet. That was the thing. Not even once. Her eyes were dry, her skin tight from the effort of not feeling. She didn't need tears tonight. She needed control. An hour later at home she walked into the living room, heels clicking quietly on the marble. Everything was silent. On the glass coffee table sat a bouquet, white orchids, Nathan's usual gesture when he did something wrong. No card. Just the flowers, ghostly and sweet and pointless. She didn't touch them. Instead she sat down on the couch, kicked off her heels and pulled out her phone. He played the full video. Cassidy was twirling around in slow motion, surrounded by candlelight and scattered petals. "He said he couldn't wait to see me tonight," she told the camera, voice syrupy. "Even with his award ceremony, he just had to be here." She giggled. "Guess I'm more important than a trophy." Nathan's voice could be heard faintly in the background. Come here, he said. Then softer. You wore the red. I love the red. Elena paused the video. Not because it was unbearable, because she didn't want to give Cassidy the satisfaction of finishing it. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then with precision she opened her encrypted notes app. Inside was a checklist labeled Exit Strategy. She began ticking items off. Elena had built a life for herself that could fold like origami when needed. In the weeks leading up to the gala, she had slowly moved assets under shell companies, sold shares of her design firm discreetly, and diverted profits into an offshore trust. Nathan hadn't noticed. He was too busy redecorating Cassidy's apartment. Tonight only confirmed what she had already planned. The facade had cracked. She just had to walk out the door. At 2 a.m. Nathan returned home. He smelled of roses and cologne that wasn't his. Elle, he called softly, pushing the bedroom door open. You awake? She lay in bed, eyes closed, breath steady. Pretending. He sat beside her, brushing hair from her forehead as if nothing had changed. I won the award, he whispered. She didn't respond. You should have stayed to watch, he added. I mentioned you in the speech. That was a lie. He had been there. She had heard every word. Still she didn't move. Nathan sighed and kissed her temple. Don't be mad. I'll make it up to you. Then he slipped under the covers beside her, humming to himself like a man with a clear conscience. Elena stared at the ceiling, unmoving. In the morning she would be gone. And Nathan Cross, the man they called perfect, would learn what silence really meant. Elena always began her mornings the same way. A black coffee, a stretch by the window, and precisely 20 minutes of digital silence before checking the world. Today, though, there was no stretch. No coffee. She sat at the edge of her bed, barefoot, still in her nightgown, staring at her phone. The morning sun slanted through the curtains, streaking her bare legs with lines of light, but she barely felt the warmth. In her hands, a voice memo glowed blue on the screen. Sent by mistake. Nathan's voice crackled through. Don't say her name again. She's not some saint, okay? Everyone thinks she's the reason my empire works. She's just a brand. A walking brochure. There was laughter. Cassidy's. Then why are you still married to her? Nathan again, lower, like he was proud of this part. Because I needed her name when I was climbing. Everyone trusted her. Investors adored the idea of us. But it's different now. With you I feel free. Real. Elena hit pause. Then play again. Just to be sure she hadn't imagined it. Well, the words were still there. Come. Practiced. Delivered without hesitation. And worst of all, honest. Not the kind of thing said in anger. Not temporary. A belief rooted deep. Her thumb hovered over delete, but she saved it instead. Not out of vengeance. Out of clarity. She had always believed she'd misread Nathan. That if she just worked harder, loved better, kept the storms away, he'd see her. Need her. Love her the way she once believed he did. But the recording proved it. He had never wanted her. Only what she represented. By noon she had packed 1 suitcase and 3 hard drives. The suitcase was for necessities. The hard drives were her entire life. Architectural layouts, brand proposals, patents she'd filed before she ever married Nathan. Everything that was hers. Not a single photo of them went into the bag. She left those in the house on purpose. Let him keep the memories he fabricated. She booked a flight to Tallinn, Estonia, a place she had once dreamed of retiring to, quiet and cool, full of design inspiration and anonymity. The ticket confirmation landed in her inbox at 12:22 p.m. Her phone buzzed again. Another Cassidy post. A boomerang of her blowing a kiss to the camera, perched on a marble vanity. Behind her, unmistakable in its design, was Elena's mirror. The one Nathan had custom-built for their master suite. The same one Elena had drawn on a napkin 3 years ago. He had gifted it to Cassidy. Caption read, Queen energy only. Crown mirror mirror. Elena didn't reply. Instead she called her lawyer. At 2:03 p.m., Elena sat across from Amanda Lynn in a high-rise office downtown. The windows gave a panoramic view of the skyline. Half of it designed by Nathan Cross, the other half silently corrected by Elena behind the scenes. I'm initiating a full withdrawal, Elena said, sliding over the USB and notarized papers. Amanda blinked. That's fast. I've been preparing for weeks. Amanda frowned. Does Nathan know? Elena smiled faintly. If he did, I wouldn't be here. Amanda hesitated. You're sure about this? I'm sure. There was no tremble in her voice. No panic. Elena's signature was swift, practiced. Amanda glanced at the USB. This is every proof you'll need, Elena said. Of fraud. Of character misconduct. Of public misrepresentation. Cassidy's been wearing my intellectual property for weeks. And Nathan's given her access to confidential project materials. She live-streamed from our design studio last week. Amanda exhaled slowly. You could bury them both. Elena's gaze didn't flinch. No. I don't want to bury them. Then what do you want? I want to disappear. By midnight, her legal name change request was filed under seal. Her ownership stakes in Cross Design Holdings had been sold in silence to a Singaporean holding company under her alias. Nathan wouldn't notice. Not yet. His eyes were always on the crowd, never the accounting books. In his world, if something glittered, it was gold. If it didn't, it could be ignored. And Elena had made herself very dull lately. On purpose. 3 days later, she walked into her design studio for the last time. The walls still held samples of textures and lighting plans. Nathan's office on the mezzanine floor was locked. He hadn't used it in months. Cassidy had asked him to work from her loft. She'd said the energy of their home was better for inspiration. Elena had overheard that phone call. Nathan hadn't even whispered. She entered her own office, disconnected the hard drives from the secure server, and closed the file marked Future, Hart Estates. He would never build that home. She would never raise her children here. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a medical notification. She had forgotten her blood test results. She opened the patient portal. HCG, positive. He stared at the screen. Pregnant. No heartbeat yet. Just a confirmation. She sat down hard in her chair. The room swam. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The betrayal, the press, Cassidy's mocking eyes, Nathan's lies. Only one thing mattered. There was a life inside her. One untainted by PR. By betrayal. By architecture deals and designer gowns. Something real. And suddenly her timeline compressed. She had planned to leave in 2 weeks. Now she would leave in 2 days. The night before her departure, Nathan came home smelling of expensive cologne and stale champagne. He was in the bathtub. He walked in, eyes tired. Elle. She didn't look at him. I know I've been off lately, he said, kneeling beside the tub. It's just been a lot. The board's pressuring me. And I know you've been stressed too. She still said nothing. He placed a hand on her wet arm. I miss us. Let's fix it. Okay. She finally looked at him. He smiled, relieved. But what he saw in her face wasn't forgiveness. It was indifference. The worst kind of goodbye. I'll think about it, she said quietly. At 4:30 a.m. she left. No notes. No text. No voicemail. Only silence. Her flight to Tallinn departed at 7:10 a.m. She watched the sun rise above the clouds from 32,000 feet, her hand gently resting over her abdomen. Her last name was already changed. Her new life was beginning. And Nathan Cross wouldn't realize what he'd lost until it was far too late. Tallinn greeted her with cold, clean air and quiet cobbled streets that echoed softly under her boots. No flashing lights. No camera drones. No whispered gossip from across gallery halls. It was exactly what Elena needed. Her rental apartment overlooked a sleepy square where old women sold fresh berries and scarves handwoven in forest-colored wool. There were no mirrors in the hallway, no social events to dress for, no Cassidy Monroe live streams playing on screens in passing taxis. Her silence was complete here. And for the first time in years it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like power. She lived anonymously under the name Al Marin, an identity she'd built with precision. New passport. New bank accounts. New SIM card. Only Amanda, her lawyer, knew her exact location. At the design agency she'd discreetly joined as a freelance consultant, her colleagues knew her only by her talent. And that suited her just fine. The third morning in Tallinn she found herself staring at a small blue and white pregnancy test sitting quietly on her bathroom counter. She had taken another one just to be sure. Still positive. She exhaled slowly. A child. Her child. The irony wasn't lost on her. Cassidy had been posting for weeks about baby fever and leaving diaper emojis in comments under photos of her and Nathan lounging in resort bathtubs. Meanwhile, Elena had the real thing. And for now she told no one. She started documenting everything. Her symptoms. Her cravings. The changes in her body. Not for anyone else. Not even to prove anything. But because for once her life felt hers alone. She stopped following any US headlines. She deleted the apps that gave her luxury lifestyle alerts. She ignored the Fashion Week pings in her inbox. That world wasn't hers anymore. But sometimes things still slip through the cracks. Like when her coworker, an Estonian girl named Marja, showed her a crazy viral wedding proposal that was making international news. It was a hotel ballroom flooded with roses. A custom LED light display on the ceiling. Cassidy Monroe in a champagne gown, dabbing tears away as a man kneeled before her. The video didn't show his face. But Elena didn't need to see it. She recognized the handwriting on the backdrop. The cursive script that read "Forever Starts Now." She had drawn that design 3 years ago on a scrap of vellum and left it on Nathan's desk, joking that he should use it for their wedding vow renewal. Now Cassidy was wearing it like a tiara. Marja beamed. God, I'd kill for a man like that. Do you think he's real? Elena smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe he's just a very good actor. That night, Elena scrolled through Cassidy's feed with clinical precision. The captions were all sugar-dripping fiction. We started with laughter. We ended with forever. Ring sparkles. Here's to the man who gave up everything for me. This ring? Custom made. Just like our love story. But the photos told a different story. She was wearing Elena's ring. The one Nathan had claimed was one of a kind, based on Elena's favorite Gothic cathedral spires. And now Cassidy had it on her middle finger, spinning it for the camera while lip-syncing to a song about stolen hearts. It should have made Elena angry. But it didn't. She didn't feel rage anymore, just a bone-deep sense of clarity. Nathan hadn't just moved on. He'd copied and pasted their life, decor, script, vows, and handed it to another woman. A cheaper replica. A plastic echo of something real. The next day, Elena walked into her bank and transferred every last cent from her US accounts into her Estonian trust. When the teller smiled and asked if she'd like to close the American accounts permanently, Elena replied, yes. Please erase the history too. Back in her apartment, she logged onto the resale platform she'd been quietly using. Jewelry. Designer gowns. Furniture. Everything Nathan had ever bought her now had a price tag. Including the diamond cuff she once wore to the Metropolitan Gala. The listing read, unwanted gift. In perfect condition. No sentiment attached. It sold in 30 minutes. Her phone buzzed. A message from Amanda. Cross Enterprises is officially being audited. Your lawsuit triggered it. Elena stared at the screen. She hadn't even gone public. Just a quiet legal submission under her old name, buried behind layers of redirection. But Nathan's empire was built on delicate illusions. All it took was one push. He typed back. No contact with me. Not ever. I want no media trail. Amanda replied with a single thumbs up. Elena placed her phone face down. She looked around her apartment. It was small. 2 rooms. Minimalist. Sparse. But it was clean. And more importantly, quiet. Later that week her nausea began. A metallic taste that wouldn't leave. Elena forced herself to drink ginger tea, stare at spreadsheets and attend planning calls, all while trying to forget Cassidy's voice echoing through a hotel suite. But the internet had a sick sense of humor. Her inbox began filling with email alerts tied to her old PR firm. Someone, likely Cassidy or Nathan's team, had tried to access her old branding accounts. One subject line read, rebranding the Queen, Elena's legacy reimagined? She chuckled. They were trying to make her disappearance into a PR opportunity. But she had already taken her name with her. It was trademarked. Protected. Unreachable. They could steal her designs. Imitate her charm. Mimic her tone. But they'd never be her. That night as she tried to sleep, the baby fluttered for the first time. It wasn't dramatic. Just a faint ripple beneath her ribcage. But it made her eyes water. It reminded her that this life she was building wasn't just for her. She wasn't just escaping anymore. She was creating. And that changed everything. The next morning she walked through the snowy street to a cafe near the design firm. She was reviewing blueprints when someone placed a coffee down next to hers. "Is this yours?" a familiar voice asked. She looked up. It took her a second. Jude Everett. Architect. Quiet. Kind. She hadn't seen him in over 4 years. He looked exactly the same, rumpled jacket, always a little out of breath but with that same warm energy. "Jude?" she asked cautiously. He blinked. "Elena?" She froze. Then smiled quickly. "No. Marin." He hesitated, reading her expression. Then nodded. "Right. L." He didn't press. Didn't ask questions. Just sat across from her and pulled out a sketchpad. "I'm working on something nearby," he said. "You're freelancing, right?" She nodded. "Need a co-designer?" Elena tilted her head. "Just like that." He grinned. "You were always the best. Besides, I've missed working with someone who listens." She didn't say yes. But she didn't say no. By the end of the week she was collaborating with Jude on a sustainable residential project near the edge of town. Nothing flashy. Nothing viral. But it felt like breathing again. No suits. No secrets. Just pencils and honest lines. And for the first time in months when she walked home at night, Elena didn't feel like a woman running. He felt like a woman arriving. It had snowed again the night before. Not a dramatic blizzard. Just a quiet, fine powder that turned the streets of Tallinn into a soft grayscale painting. Elena stood at her window, watching the snow settle over the iron street lamps and tree branches like powdered sugar. She didn't turn on the heat. She liked the cold now. It reminded her that she was somewhere new, far from red carpets, camera flashes, and betrayal disguised as love. Her phone sat face down on the kitchen counter. Turned off. For 3 days straight. He was done watching. By noon she sat in her small workspace, scribbling notes across parchment. The design for Jude's housing project had grown more detailed, more ambitious. Elena hadn't felt this much creative control in years. No revisions demanded by corporate sponsors. No last-minute brand name integrations. No requests from Nathan to make it Instagram-friendly. Just structure. Deep breath. She rubbed her growing belly absently as she drew, the faint pressure grounding her. Then her email pinged. He stared at the screen. From Amanda Lynn. Subject: Cassidy Monroe goes public with engagement. She didn't open the article. Didn't need to. A photo was embedded in the email body. Cassidy posed on the edge of a spiral staircase, a massive ring flashing at the camera. She was dressed in white, some mockery of a wedding gown, and beneath her the words "She said yes." The influencer who won the perfect man glowed in headline font. And then the quote from Cassidy. "Sometimes you don't have to fight for love. It finds you when you're finally brave enough to ask for what you deserve." Elena didn't feel her hands tighten. She didn't slam anything. She just clicked archive and closed her laptop. That afternoon she walked to the edge of the city to a small estate agency. The man behind the counter had a kind face and a thick Estonian accent. She handed him her new identity papers and requested help listing a series of luxury real estate properties located across California, New York, and Milan. "I want them gone within 60 days, she said quietly. "No press. No trails. Don't negotiate on my behalf. Just take the highest offers and disappear the money." He blinked. "Are these, divorce settlements?" She gave a small smile. "You could say that." Within hours her properties were on private international exchanges, coded and anonymized. The infamous Loveview penthouse in New York, designed by Nathan and gifted on their 3rd anniversary, sold for 30% below market price. He didn't care. She didn't want profit. She wanted detachment. At home she began boxing things. Not because she was leaving Tallinn, but because she was purging the past. She placed every necklace Nathan had given her into a flat black velvet pouch and mailed it to a jewelry auction house. She shredded printed photos one by one. Their honeymoon in Santorini. Their first joint magazine feature. The launch party for their design firm. She fed them to the machine like dead leaves. By nightfall her fingers smelled faintly of ink and perfume and nothingness. The next morning she stared at the screen again. Cassidy had posted a video. A full tour of her engagement venue. Elena's venue. She had designed it 4 years ago for a charity gala. One that never happened because of scheduling conflicts. The plans had sat in Nathan's personal vault. Apparently not anymore. The video panned over every corner. The rose tunnel, the double-layered heart-shaped altar, the snow globe chandeliers. Even the font Cassidy used on the signs was Elena's, handwritten for that gala design. Caption read, "He remembered everything I said I loved. Every detail. Because that's what love looks like." Elena didn't feel rage. She felt insulted. How little creativity they had. How recycled everything was. Her life, her vision, her memories. To the world it looked like a fairy tale. To her it looked like theft. That night she received an email from a US design magazine. "We're running a feature on Nathan's new bride-to-be. Cassidy mentioned the design was originally yours. Would you like to provide a quote?" She deleted it. She would give them nothing. They could keep the narrative. She'd keep her peace. 3 days later Nathan called. The first call went unanswered. The second. The third. Then a voicemail. "It's me. I wanted to hear your voice. I know you've been gone and I know I've made mistakes, okay? But Cassidy's she's in love with the idea of us and everything's just been moving too fast. I don't even know if I proposed. I mean, not really. I was drunk. You always knew how to slow me down. Please call me back." She played it once. Then again. There was, finally, regret. Not for what he did. But because she wasn't there to clean up after him. She didn't respond. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. She received a new scan photo from her clinic. The baby was healthy. Strong. A little ahead of growth. She stared at the grayscale profile of her child. Nose forming, hands curled, heartbeat steady. The doctor smiled. "He's a fighter. A son." He was having a son. She smiled for the first time in days. And in that moment she made a decision. That night she stood in front of her apartment mirror. She wore a loose sweater, her belly just beginning to round in the reflection. She took a photo. Just one. Then she opened her encrypted drive and saved it under a folder labeled Future. Not family. Not Nathan. Not past. Just future. Then she turned off her phone, pressed the final button on her property liquidation, and watched the email confirmation blink. "Love you sold. Transfer complete." The last remnant of her life with Nathan was gone. The next morning she walked into the design firm with a sketchbook under her arm and a softness in her eyes Jude hadn't seen before. He raised an eyebrow. "Sleep well." "Better than I expected," she said, setting her things down beside his. He looked at her for a moment longer, then nodded. "I had an idea for the southern elevation. Want to take a look?" She smiled. "Yes." Across the ocean, Nathan sat on the edge of a bed that no longer felt like home. Cassidy was snoring lightly beside him, her phone face down, the engagement ring shining under the lamplight. He picked up his own phone and opened his photo gallery. The last image he had of Elena was from an awards gala, the one before the night she vanished. She was looking away, her smile calm, eyes distant. He hadn't known it then. But she had already been gone. In a penthouse once built to impress, Nathan Cross sat in the dark. Cassidy Monroe had gone live again, this time to showcase the honeymoon mood lighting Nathan had supposedly designed just for her. The comments under her stream were full of heart emojis, drooling faces, and more than one, "Ugh, I want a man like this." She didn't notice that Nathan hadn't joined her on camera in weeks. She didn't know that 2 major investors had just pulled out of his residential project. Or that his company email had been flagged internally for possible intellectual property misuse. She definitely didn't know about the audit. Nathan sat with his laptop open, the notification blinking. Intellectual property infringement notice. Design ID 3447, original designer, Elena Hart. He stared at the screen like it was written in a foreign language. This couldn't be happening. In Estonia the air was sharp and dry, the kind that woke you up before your alarm. Elena stepped into her modest apartment and toed off her boots. She had just come from a prenatal yoga class. Jude had walked her there earlier. He didn't say much, just handed her a thermos of tea and waited until she was safely inside. She appreciated him in the way one appreciates peace after a storm. Not dramatic. Not flashy. Just steady. She pulled off her coat and opened her laptop to check a design file when her inbox buzzed. A subject line from Amanda. Cross Enterprises in legal trouble. She clicked. The summary was clear. Three corporate sponsors had withdrawn. Her lawsuit had prompted an internal audit. Nathan's firm had been accused of reusing protected layout blueprints under Cassidy Monroe's brand name. The press was catching on. Elena sat back in her chair. She should have felt triumphant. Instead she felt empty. There was no satisfaction in watching something burn when you'd already walked away. Still, she forwarded the article to a secure archive labeled, Documentation. No response required. Then she got up and made tea. Meanwhile, back in Manhattan, Cassidy Monroe's fairy tale was beginning to show its seams. Brand deals stopped coming in. One influencer friend unfollowed her. It started when a viral TikTok claimed she stole the engagement venue concept from another designer. Screenshots were shared. Design comparisons. Even Elena's hand-drawn sketches were leaked on Twitter. Unattributed but deeply familiar to anyone who had followed the design world. The whispers were building. Under one of Cassidy's engagement posts, a comment stood out. Didn't Nathan's ex design all this? This isn't new. It's stolen. She deleted it. Then another. Then another. But the comments kept coming. Nathan knew what was happening. And he hated it. The press was finally asking questions. Where is Elena Hart? Why did she disappear after years of being the genius behind Cross Design? Is Nathan Cross's empire built on someone else's brilliance? He called Amanda. Twice. No answer. Then he tried her assistant. Finally, Amanda responded with a message. Elena has no statement. And she has no intention of coming back. He nearly threw his phone. Elena, meanwhile, was attending her second ultrasound appointment. The doctor smiled as the image flickered on screen. There he is, the technician whispered. Elena stared at the monitor. Her son. 10 fingers. 10 toes. A strong little heartbeat. The room dimmed, the world went silent, and all she could hear was the rhythmic pulsing of new life. Her eyes stung. Not from sadness. From something else. Hope. That night she walked home under falling snow. The streetlights glowed gold in the mist and a light crunch echoed beneath each step. When she reached her apartment, a small box sat on her stoop. Inside it, a single piece of paper, no sender name, no return address. Just one sentence, printed in Nathan's handwriting. Are you really going to keep my child from me? Elena stared at the words. Then she tore the paper in half. And burned it. Back in New York, Cassidy's final brand partnership pulled out after an exposé confirmed that several of her photo shoots featured plagiarized layouts. Sponsors cited concerns about authenticity. In private, Cassidy screamed. Nathan tried to calm her, but she shrieked, I gave up everything for you. And now people think I'm a copycat? I should have known you were using me too. He left the room. Shut the door. And for the first time Nathan Cross felt utterly alone. In Estonia, Elena began preparing for the birth. She bought a small crib secondhand. Not for the price but because she liked the idea of giving something used a new life. She found a pediatrician. Signed up for parenting workshops. Jude, careful not to overstep, offered to assemble the baby's dresser. She let him. Some days he would bring her design drafts and ask for her thoughts. Not because he needed them but because he wanted her involved. Other days they would walk by the frozen lake in silence. It was the closest thing to intimacy Elena had ever known that didn't demand anything in return. One afternoon, as she packed a small box of keepsakes for her baby, sketches, ultrasound prints, a copy of her first design blueprint, she found the velvet ring box at the bottom of her desk drawer. The engagement ring Nathan had given her. Once it had been a symbol of devotion. Now it was just a reminder. She opened the window, held the ring for one last second, and let it fall. It disappeared into the snow. Gone. The next day, Cassidy made a final move to salvage her brand. She announced a temporary separation from Nathan on Instagram. Caption read, I need space to rediscover who I am outside of love. No regrets. Just growth. The internet rolled its collective eyes. But behind the scenes it was worse. Cassidy had been cut off from all shared accounts. Nathan had started drinking heavily. His business was bleeding. His friends had stopped calling. His empire had cracked. All while the woman he had once called a walking brochure was across the ocean, building a life he'd never be allowed into again. In Tallinn, Elena stood in the middle of her nursery, hands on her hips. The sun cast golden rays across the small wooden floor. She closed her eyes. The child growing inside her kicked once, strong and sure. And she whispered to the room, to the silence, to herself. You'll never know chaos. You'll never beg for love. You'll never be made to feel small. Then she smiled. Because this was the life she chose. And for the first time in a long, long while she was finally free. In the world Nathan Cross once dominated, whispers had replaced applause. What used to be sleek email invitations to exclusive architecture galas had turned into silence. The phones in his midtown office rang less. The assistant who once worshipped him now sent brief, hesitant emails without the cheerful exclamations she used to sign off with. Even his secretary, who had once timed his espresso with his moods, left her resignation letter taped to his office door. He hadn't noticed until hours later. And Cassidy? She was no longer in the penthouse. She'd left after an argument where Nathan, in a rare moment of honesty, told her, "I think I just wanted to win, not to love." He didn't stop her when she packed her things. Just watched. It was strange. He had everything once. Now it was all turning into dust. In Estonia, Elena was folding baby clothes. Each item was soft and neutral-toned. She hadn't bought pinks or blues. She didn't need labels. Her child would define themselves on their own terms. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Amanda. Cassidy Monroe officially declared bankrupt. Nathan hasn't filed, but Cross Enterprises has frozen new contracts. Also, he's trying to track your location. Using private services. Elena didn't reply. She walked to her closet, pulled out a small storage box and opened it. Inside were backup identity documents. Travel-ready documents. She had prepared them months ago, but it still made her breath catch to hold them again. She ran her hand over the passport embossed with L. Marin. She wouldn't use it. Not unless she had to. But it reminded her she was always one step ahead. And she had no intention of giving Nathan even a sliver of her new world. That afternoon she met Jude at a small cafe on the edge of town. He was late as usual. But when he arrived he held a thick envelope. "What's that?" she asked. He smiled sheepishly. "Final draft of the housing project. I want your seal before I submit it. You've been with this since day one. It should have your signature." "I'm just a consultant," she replied. "Sure," he said gently. "And I'm just a guy with a pencil." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound between them the clinking of spoons against porcelain. Then he looked at her. "You know," Jude said, "you don't have to keep your guard up with me." Elena met his eyes. "I know. I don't want anything from you. I know. But I'm not going anywhere either." This time she didn't answer. She just sipped her tea and let the silence sit between them like an understanding. That night, Nathan sat on his bedroom floor, wine glass untouched, laptop open. He was watching an old press conference where he stood beside Elena, proudly announcing the launch of Heart and Cross Interiors. Elena, poised and polished in black silk, had turned to the cameras and said, "Design isn't about attention. It's about soul." He had rolled his eyes back then. He thought it was dramatic. Now he replayed her face over and over, searching for what he'd missed. But what haunted him most wasn't her departure. It was how quietly she left. No scandal. No revenge press. No last words. Just silence. And silence couldn't be argued with. Meanwhile, Cassidy tried to claw back her audience. She launched a podcast, but it flopped. She posted teary apology videos about being misled by love, but they were filled with cuts and filters. Too rehearsed. Worse, leaked DMs revealed that she had known all along about Elena's designs. The public turned cold. Brand endorsements dried up. Someone even started a trending hashtag. Hashtag copycat Cassidy. Her agent dropped her. Her landlord raised her rent. Her followers unfollowed. Cassidy, once on the cover of influencer magazines, now lived off an expired PR image and store-brand lipstick. And she had nothing left to imitate. In Tallinn, Elena stood on the balcony of her apartment, wrapped in a thick coat, one hand resting on her stomach. The baby was more active now. Small kicks, strong movements. Jude had just dropped off a basket of hand-knitted baby clothes. He never stayed long. Just enough to make her feel supported, never smothered. She respected that. One night she asked him, "Why are you so patient with me?" He'd answered, "Because I've made peace with the fact that the people who need the most love are often the ones who've been taught they don't deserve it." It had taken everything in her not to cry. One morning she received another email. From Amanda. "Nathan Cross has requested a formal mediation meeting. Says he wants to apologize and make amends. Wants to know if he can speak to you before the baby is born." Elena closed the email. She brewed her tea. She deleted the message. 2 days later, a luxury bouquet was delivered to her office. No card. Just white orchids. He placed them in the trash. When her due date neared, she bought a new crib. Handmade, unfinished wood. No lacquer. No fancy engravings. Just strong, clean lines. A fresh beginning. She placed it near the window. No cameras. No press. Just peace. Nathan, in a last attempt to reclaim something, anything, commissioned a reporter to write a piece titled, "The Woman Who Disappeared, The Mystery of Elena Hart." But the story never published. Because the journalist found nothing. No social media. No paper trail. No gossip. Just rumors. Whispers of a woman who had walked away without screaming. And taken her brilliance with her. Cassidy sold the last of her designer bags online. No one recognized her anymore at events. One comment under her final live stream read, "Maybe next time don't try to be someone else. Especially someone irreplaceable." She went offline the next day. And Elena? She sat with Jude on a hill near the water watching the horizon. She was 8 months along. "You okay?" he asked, handing her a bottle of water. "I'm more than okay," she said quietly. She placed his hand on her belly. The baby kicked. He smiled. She didn't say she loved him. He didn't say it either. But there was no need. Some things don't need confession. Only presence. The day Elena went into labor, snow-blanketed Tallinn like silence made visible. It started early in the morning, mild contractions that woke her just before sunrise. At first she wasn't sure. She'd read enough articles, seen enough videos to know that false alarms were common. But this wasn't a drill. It was time. She called the hospital, then calmly packed the last of her maternity bag. A warm cardigan, a music playlist on a phone with no SIM card, and a folded note addressed to her future son. She left it blank inside. She'd write the words after she met him. Jude arrived 20 minutes later. He didn't ask if she wanted him there. He simply appeared, wearing 2 scarves, a coffee in hand, his cheeks red from the wind. "Ready?" he asked gently. Elena nodded, wincing slightly as another wave rolled through her. They didn't speak during the ride. There was no need to. In a private maternity suite overlooking the frozen city skyline, Elena breathed through hours of contractions, her brow damp, her hands steady. Jude never left the room. He just sat in the corner, offering a presence that didn't overwhelm. The nurses liked him immediately. They thought he was the father. He didn't correct them. Elena didn't either. Not because of shame, but because he was the one who stayed. After 12 long hours at 9:41 p.m., a cry sliced through the room. Loud. Clear. Certain. Elena's head fell back against the pillow in relief as they placed a small red-faced infant on her chest. Her son. Her world. He blinked up at her with cloudy eyes and a scrunched brow, already stubborn, already strong. Tears slipped down her cheeks, soft and silent. She had never believed she would cry again. But this child wasn't pain. He was everything after pain. Jude held him second. He didn't speak. Just looked down at the boy wrapped in flannel and whispered something too quiet for even Elena to hear. Then he turned to her and smiled. "You did it," he said. Elena smiled faintly. "He did most of the work." The nurse asked, "Name?" She hesitated for a moment. Then she said softly, "Leo. Leo Marin." A name with no connection to the man who had broken her. A name free from anything that ever came before. Across the ocean, Nathan stared at the ceiling of a luxury hotel suite with hollow eyes. He hadn't slept in 2 days. Cassidy had moved to Arizona with what was left of her mother's savings. She'd blocked him on everything. His team had dwindled to 2 staffers, both of whom were actively looking for other jobs. The last email he received from his former legal advisor read, "Elena Hart has permanently sealed all contact. Any future communication attempts will be classified as harassment under international jurisdiction. He deleted it. But the words lingered. 3 weeks later he finally received a photo. No sender name. No caption. Just a picture of a crib. Plain wood. Sunlight streaking through the curtains. A small infant-sized fist curled around a blanket in the corner of the frame. He knew. He didn't need DNA tests or paternity suits. That was his child. And he would never meet him. He stared at the photo until the screen dimmed and the battery died. In Tallinn, Elena was wrapping Leo in a soft gray onesie with tiny bear ears. The snow had melted. Spring was slow, but it was coming. Jude sat beside her on the couch, reading softly from a children's book. Leo, nestled in Elena's arms, blinked lazily, half asleep. "You're getting good at that," she murmured. Jude grinned. "I'm just trying to impress him." She turned her gaze to her son. "You already have." There was a pause. Then Jude asked carefully, "Have you thought about telling him? About his biological father?" Elena nodded. "When he's old enough to ask. I'll tell him the truth." No anger. No need. Jude tilted his head. "And if he wants to find him someday? I won't stop him. But I won't help him either." Silence settled between them like a shared pact. Later that evening Elena stood by the window, Leo against her chest, his small hand wrapped around her finger. She whispered to him. "Not lullabies. But truths. You are not someone's apology. You are not someone's compensation. You are not here because someone begged to keep you. You are here because I chose you. I chose us." Behind her, Jude quietly swept the kitchen, careful not to disturb them. This was their rhythm now. Soft, quiet, solid. That weekend, the last property Elena ever owned in the U.S. was finalized for sale. The villa Nathan once built for her, the one he named Haven Light, was purchased by a preservationist foundation and converted into a sanctuary for single mothers. Amanda texted her. "Poetic ending. You okay?" Elena replied. "I'm better than okay. I'm home." Nathan never rebuilt. He tried to pitch new designs, but no one would sign him without Elena's quiet touch behind the scenes. His name became synonymous with theft, scandal, and missed potential. He was invited to speak at a minor university once, but the hall was half empty. No applause. Just silence. And one empty seat in the front row. He stared at it all night. Back in Tallinn, Elena framed the first picture of Leo standing, still unsteady but determined. She placed it on a shelf beside a blank white journal titled Letters for Leo. She didn't write in it right away. She just stared at the empty pages. And smiled. Because for the first time in years, she wasn't looking back. She wasn't erasing. She was writing forward. It had been 5 months since Elena gave birth. Tallinn was full of color again. Yellow tulips blooming at street corners, open-air markets bursting with local strawberries, families sitting on benches beneath sun-splashed skies. Elena pushed Leo's stroller through the cobbled square, sunglasses on, a light breeze brushing her hair. No one recognized her here. She wasn't Elena Hart, disgraced socialite, stolen designer, runaway wife. Here she was Elle Marin, a woman who loved black coffee and old jazz records, who visited the florist twice a week and always left extra bread out for birds. And a mother. That mattered most. Leo was thriving. Big eyes, curious fingers, already trying to pull his socks off whenever he could. He laughed when she played peekaboo and cried only when he was tired or bored. Never when he was hungry. Elena made sure of that. She'd once designed rooms for billionaires, mansions for headlines. Now she designed soft spaces for a child who only wanted love. It was the most meaningful work she had ever done. But peace was never fully uninterrupted. That evening, as she and Jude prepared dinner, him chopping vegetables, her swaying with Leo on her hip, her encrypted email pinged. Subject line. FY. Cassidy Monroe's podcast, Episode 0 released. Elena frowned. She opened the message. Amanda had included a private audio file and a single sentence. "She's trying to rewrite the story." Elena didn't press play immediately. She walked Leo to his crib, kissed his forehead, and waited until he drifted into soft baby snores. Then, seated on the edge of the bed, she plugged in her earphones and hit play. Cassidy's voice came through. Familiar. Sugar-coated. Calculated. Everyone knows the headlines. But no one knows the truth. They called me a homewrecker, a thief, a social climber. But I was in love. And I made mistakes, yes. But I wasn't the only one. Pause. A breath. He told me she didn't love him. That she only stayed for the brand. That he was alone. And maybe I believed it because I wanted to. Maybe I was naive. But don't women get to be naive too? Or is that reserved for those with better PR teams? The tone shifted. She left without a word. Just vanished. Took the baby. Took everything. No goodbye. No grace. And now I get death threats for a man we both trusted. Was I wrong to love him? Maybe. But was I the villain? I don't think so. Music faded in. A practiced outro. This is Cassidy Monroe. And I'm done being your scapegoat. Silence. Elena sat motionless. Not angry. Just cold. She removed the earbuds, closed the laptop and stood. Jude looked up from the couch. You okay? Fine, she said softly. Just ghosts trying to wear new masks. He understood without asking. He always did. The next morning, Cassidy's podcast trended on niche platforms. Sympathy, backlash, speculation. But the mainstream audience didn't care anymore. People had moved on. Influencer culture was a revolving door. And Cassidy's moment had passed. Still, the few loyal defenders who remained clung to her narrative like gospel. She's brave for speaking up. Elena was too quiet. That's suspicious. Amanda forwarded a media inquiry from a journalist requesting Elena's comment. Elena replied with 3 words. No public statement. And deleted the rest. Nathan, meanwhile, sat in a rented 1-bedroom apartment in upstate New York, far from the city skyline he used to dominate. He listened to Cassidy's podcast 3 times. It didn't move him. He could hear the performance behind every line. The same Cassidy who once swore she'd never talk publicly again. But what struck him most was her bitterness toward Elena. She had never known her. Had never deserved to speak her name. No. Now Elena had something he would never get back. A family. A son. A real life. He opened his gallery and stared again at that one photo. The one that came anonymously months ago. The soft wooden crib. The edge of a tiny blanket. A sliver of Leo's hand. He hadn't received anything since. Just silence. And silence was a far louder punishment than hate. In Tallinn, Elena took Leo to the edge of the lake where spring wildflowers were beginning to bloom. She held him close as the wind brushed through the trees. His tiny hand clutched the collar of her jacket, strong and insistent. She smiled. He's so alert, said Jude, crouching beside them with his camera. He doesn't miss a thing, Elena replied. She looked down at her son's round face, his curious stare. I think he already knows who we are, she said quietly. Who's that? He turned to Jude. Survivors. That night, after Leo was asleep, she opened her journal, the one titled Letters for Leo. She finally began to write. You came from silence. From strength. From love that knew when to walk away instead of scream. You don't carry the burden of his mistakes. You carry the grace of my decision to choose peace. And one day when you ask me where you came from, I'll tell you the truth without bitterness. Because I forgave myself the moment I chose you. She closed the journal and slid it into a drawer. There would be more pages. Later. For now she was simply living them. In New York, Nathan declined another interview. He was offered a slot on a podcast to clear the air. He almost accepted. Then remembered how Elena never spoke once. She didn't try to correct the narrative. She simply left it behind. And maybe that was her greatest strength. He opened a blank email to Amanda. Typed. Does she ever ask about me? But he never hit send. He just stared at the blinking cursor. And closed the laptop. In Tallinn, the first warm night of the season arrived. Jude brought over dinner, grilled vegetables, fresh bread and berries for dessert. They ate on the terrace while Leo slept in a bassinet nearby. Do you ever miss it? Jude asked. The spotlight. The noise. The lies. No, she said. I miss the girl who thought it meant something. And do you like the woman you are now? She looked at Leo. Then at Jude. Then at the stars. Yes, she said. For the first time she meant it. 6 months had passed since Leo was born. By now, Elena could navigate Tallinn's cobblestone streets with a stroller one-handed while sipping lukewarm tea with the other. She knew the names of 3 local grocers, 2 midwives, and a dog named Tango who followed her every morning to the park like he'd appointed himself guardian. Life had settled into a rhythm. Predictable. Safe. And that's what made the email hit so hard. It arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Jude had just left for a site meeting and Leo was curled on the couch, giggling at his own toes. Elena opened her inbox expecting contractor invoices. Instead, she saw a message forwarded from Amanda, originally sent from a name she hadn't seen in nearly a year. From Nathan Cross. Subject: just 5 minutes. It was short. I understand I have no right to ask anything of you. But I've sold the last of the company. I've shut everything down. I'm not looking for redemption. I just want to meet him once. 5 minutes. So, I won't say a word unless you allow me to. If not, I'll leave you both alone forever. I swear it. Elena read it 3 times. Not because she was unsure what it meant, but because she needed to be sure what she felt. And the truth was, nothing. No spike of anger. No wave of longing. No curiosity. Just cold. She didn't reply. Not to Nathan. Not to Amanda. She turned off her laptop and walked to the window where Leo was napping in the sling against her chest. She pressed a kiss to the top of his head. You're not a prize to be claimed, she whispered. You're not 5 minutes of guilt relief. She rocked him slowly, watching the rain trickle down the glass. That night she finally told Jude everything. Not the headlines. Not the articles. The moments in between. She told him about the fake apologies. The public proposals. The bouquet Cassidy had worn that once belonged to her. She told him about the last day, how she had burned the ring and closed the door with no slam, no scream, no one watching. Jude sat in silence, letting her words settle. Then he said softly, I can't fix what he did. But I'll never be another person who takes from you. Elena looked at him. And for the first time she let herself want more. 2 days later, Nathan emailed again. This time it was a video. Amanda warned her before she opened it. He's not well. I debated deleting it. But I thought you deserved to decide. Elena sat in the nursery, her laptop propped on a chair while Leo played with a rattle on the rug beside her. The video was grainy. Nathan sat on a bare mattress in an unfurnished room. No lighting, no set. Just a man stripped of everything that once made him matter. His voice was rough. I made a mistake thinking I'd be forgiven eventually. But I realize now, I broke something that never deserved to be tested in the first place. I lied. I manipulated. I used your love like armor. He inhaled shakily. You don't owe me a thing. But he's my son. Even if I'm just a name in a story he hears when he's 25. I want you to know, I regret everything. Not because I lost you, but because I never deserved you in the first place. He looked into the camera. Not with the eyes of a man trying to win, but the eyes of someone finally broken. Goodbye, Elena. And thank you for everything. Even the silence. The screen went black. She didn't cry. She didn't feel triumph. Just an ache in her chest she couldn't name. Because while Nathan had hurt her in ways words couldn't reach, there had been a time, a real one, when she believed he would never do so. And now even that memory was gone. The next morning she printed a still frame from the video. The final moment just before the screen cut out. She folded it in half. And slid it into letters for Leo. She wrote beneath it. This is the man who helped create you. His mistakes are not yours to carry. If you ever meet him, let it be because you choose to, not because he demands it. Love yourself enough to protect your peace. She closed the journal. A week passed. Tallinn bloomed with spring in earnest now. Elena took Leo on long walks. She and Jude installed raised garden beds on the balcony. They planted lavender and basil and small cherry tomatoes. Leo watched wide-eyed as the seeds disappeared into soil. Elena laughed. He looks like he's watching a magic show. Isn't it? Jude smiled. The slow kind. They shared a glance. It held something unspoken but growing. That night, Jude lingered longer than usual. He helped clean up. Rocked Leo to sleep. Then stood at the door, hand on the knob, hesitating. Elena, he said quietly, I don't want to rush you. But I need to ask something. She looked up. Have you thought about us? He asked. About what this could be. Beyond co-parenting. Beyond design meetings and tea on Wednesdays. Her throat tightened. I have, she said. And I'm scared. He stepped closer. Not to close the distance but to steady her. I'm not asking you to be ready now, he said. I'm just asking you not to close the door. She exhaled. I haven't, she said. Later that night after he'd gone, she walked into Leo's room. The moonlight poured across the floor like silver ribbon. She stood beside the crib and whispered to the sleeping child. When you're old enough, I'll tell you how I rebuilt from ashes. And how someone waited, without pushing, until I felt whole again. Leo stirred but didn't wake. Elena smiled. Then turned off the light. And slept without nightmares for the first time in years. A full year had passed since Elena left New York. The spring sun in Tallinn now carried real warmth, and Leo, chubby-cheeked and full of energy, had learned to take wobbly steps, arms wide like a bird trying to remember it had wings. His laugh echoed through the apartment like bells. It was his first birthday today. There was no big party. Just a quiet gathering of 3. Jude brought a homemade cake, his handwriting a little crooked on the icing. To Leo, the boy who changed everything. Elena made lentil stew, Leo's favorite, and let him smear frosting across his face until he was covered in white and blue sugar clouds. She didn't take many pictures. Just one. Leo laughing, Jude smiling at him, and her hand, bare, no rings, resting gently on her son's back. It was enough. That evening, after Leo had fallen asleep, Elena stepped out onto the balcony, barefoot, the soft wind curling around her like ribbon. Jude followed, 2 mugs of warm cider in hand. They stood in silence, sipping, watching the stars blur into the horizon. I have something for you, Jude said, reaching into his coat. She turned curious. He pulled out a small box. Nothing fancy, no velvet, no gold embossing. Just a plain wooden square. Inside was a ring. But not a diamond. Not even a gem. It was a band of oak wood inlaid with a single silver line. Simple. Beautiful. Grounded. Like them. She blinked. I know you're not ready for all the noise, he said quietly. No announcements. No expectations. Just this. A symbol. A promise, she asked softly. No, he said. A presence. Elena swallowed. The woman she had once been would have doubted. Would have asked what the catch was. Would have wondered when it would all collapse. But the woman she had become had lived through collapse and survived. She reached out. And took the ring. She didn't put it on yet. Just held it. I'm not scared anymore, she whispered. Jude smiled. Then we start here. Back inside, Leo stirred and Elena went to him. She hummed softly as she picked him up, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. You are the reason I found myself again, she whispered. You didn't save me, little one, I saved us. But you made the journey worth it. Weeks later, a letter arrived in Tallinn from a New York legal firm. A final settlement notice. Nathan had officially dissolved Cross Enterprises and signed over the remaining intellectual property rights from their past work together. A note was enclosed. I've erased my name from what was built together. I understand now, it was never mine alone. Thank you for not destroying me when you could have. You chose silence. I will carry the weight of that mercy for the rest of my life. There was no request to see Leo. No forwarding address. Just an ending. Elena folded the letter and tucked it away in letters for Leo, beside the photo from Nathan's final video. Then she sealed the book. And placed it on the highest shelf. That summer, Elena opened her own design studio again, quietly under the name Marin Studio. It didn't carry buzz. There were no influencers. No press. But clients found her anyway. People who valued warmth over prestige. Meaning over marketability. Jude helped build the space, bringing in reclaimed wood and tall windows. The walls were painted in calm tones. There were flowers and a toy basket in the corner for Leo. It felt alive. Elena hung a single photo on the wall behind her desk. Not of buildings or awards. But a landscape of Tallinn's lake at sunset. Because it wasn't about escape anymore. It was about place. About choosing stillness. One evening, she and Jude sat on the grass by the lake, Leo crawling between them, giggling as butterflies fluttered past. They watched the sun lower. The world soften. And Jude, eyes steady, finally asked, "Will you marry me?" No noise. Just us. A ceremony in the woods. Me. And him. Elena didn't hesitate. Yes. And so, on the first golden day of autumn, Elena walked barefoot down a path of fallen leaves, Leo in her arms, Jude waiting under a canopy of birch trees. There were no guests. Just wind and warmth and the promise of something built, not out of spectacle, but out of survival. She didn't wear a veil. Didn't recite traditional vows. She simply looked at Jude and said, "Thank you for not rushing me. Thank you for staying." And he replied, "Thank you for coming back to yourself." They kissed. And Leo clapped. Months later, a former journalist from New York reached out, asking if Elena would be willing to share her story. The angle: how the woman who vanished found her voice again. Elena declined. She didn't need to be rediscovered. She had never been lost. The end.